The last thing we're going to talk about is how to find all the complex roots of a complex number. Okay, so this is actually sort of like the inverse of what we talked about before with the power theorem for complex numbers, but it's actually very similar in many sense. So the first thing you got to do is make sure that we have our complex number in trig form. It must be in trig form, okay, RCIS theta. The next thing we have to do is we have to find our new r. I'm going to actually start on example 5a while we do this so you can see what we're talking about. So I want to find the cube roots of this number. In other words, raise this to 1/3. That's the same thing as saying the cube root. Okay. First thing I have to do is make sure it's in trig form. That looks good. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find r. So 27. Remember, I raise it to the 1/3, which means the cube root of that is 3, CIS. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my initial angle, so r and theta. So just like with the power theorem, all I'm going to do is take this and multiply it with 1/3, which is the same thing as dividing by 3. So that gives me 40 degrees. So really, the first three, nothing's changed. It's exactly like the power theorem that we did previously. The last thing, and this is really the only new thing for this concept, is you have to find all subsequent answers. There are actually as many answers as there are the denominator root, okay? So for example, if this is cube root, you're actually going to have 3 answers. If I wanted you to find the 5th root of this, you would have 5 separate answers. 10th root, you would have 10 separate answers, etc. So I found one of the answers, okay? But there's actually 3 more answers. So I'm going to set them up. The r for those is exactly the same. The trick is, how do you find these last 2 angles? Simple. All you have to do is take 360 degrees and divide it by whatever that nth root is, and that will give you your incremental value. So for example, 360 divided by 3 is going to be 120 degrees. So to get from here to here, all I have to do is increment or add by 120 degrees. That gives me 160. There's my next answer. And then increment once again by another 120 degrees. So my last answer is 280 degrees. And the cool part about this is if you accidentally got a little bit crazy and you decided to increment by another 120 degrees, so if I add those two together, my 4th answer would have been CIS 400 degrees, but guess what? That's larger than 360. If I subtract 360, I actually end up with my very first answer. So it's constantly looping around these 3 answers.